everyone, I'm Madeline Boehning.
And hi, everyone, I'm Kerry Cormier, and we'd like to welcome you to our series, Neurodiversity in Literature, Disability Representation in Books and Media. So this session today is brought to you by the Learning Resource Center Network, an NJDOE Office of Special Education project. The LRCs foster the achievement of all students with disabilities, their families, and the educational professionals who work with them as they pursue the goal of increasing opportunities and improving educational outcomes in special education. The LRC network offers educators, leaders, and families of students with disabilities support, services, and professional development at each of our locations. The LRC locations and contact information is listed here on this slide. The LRC North in East Orange, New Jersey, the LRC Central in Trenton, LRC North Satellite at William Patterson University in Wayne, and the LRC South at Rowan University in Glassboro. Today's presentation is brought to you by the LRC-South. You can visit our production center in James Hall and also our resource library and visit our many professional development workshops. Today's agenda is to overview models of disability, review disability in the media, disability in literature, and discuss why representation matters. Some of the norms of the LRC-South is that we strive to use strengths-based language and demonstrate a growth mindset. We engage in solution-oriented discussions with open minds. We reflect on what is shared and seek clarification or support when needed. And we stay focused on the topic, actively listening to one another and ensuring all voices are heard. The goals and objectives of this video is that as a result of this video, educators will be able to identify key issues with representation of disability throughout history.
So a note on the language used in this video. So throughout this series, we intentionally use identity-first language. For example, disabled person, autistic person, rather than person-first language, i.e. person with a disability or person with autism, as identity-first language is preferred by autistic and disability self-advocates.
So we want to dive into disability in literature broadly understood. And so to do that, we can refer to different models of disability. So there are various ways to frame our understanding of what disability is. And we're going to share 6 of those with you here. So the first 3, we have the charity or the pity model. And so in this model, disability is going to be seen as a tragedy. Disabled people are in need of charity and help and donations, and it frames it in a very negative light. There's also the medical model, which understands disability as a failure of the mind or body, and it works to cure disability. And so it's this need to fix disability. So the first 2, the charity and the pity model and the medical model, view disability from a very negative and deficit standpoint. The third model, the social model, it makes a distinction between impairment and disability. So it's one thing to have an impairment. It's another thing to be disabled. And from this model, we can really understand that it's the environments and the attitudes that disable a person rather than the way their minds or bodies work.
So here we are going to discuss 3 more models: the cultural model, the minority model, and value neutral model. Within the cultural model, disability is created by our culture and values and our beliefs. It's often reflected in the media and literature. For the minority model, however, disabled people are considered a minoritized group within our society, and so they are often denied their civil rights historically. The value neutral model, disability can sometimes be good or bad for a person based on their intrinsic and extrinsic context, with the focus being on their overall well-being. So we're going to also talk about disability in the media. Disability in popular films and television is very limited. In one study of the top 100 films each year from 2007 to 2015, only 2.4% of speaking characters had a disability. And of these few characters, 61% had physical disabilities and 81% were male. So there really isn't a broad representation of disability in the media. There's been very little progress that has been made to show more diverse representation of disabled characters, actually played by disabled actors themselves as well.
So the same is also true when we look at disability in literature. In much of the literary canon and many of what are considered classical texts that we read, disability is more often than not negatively portrayed. Characters often reflect the charity and pity model. We see this as a prime example in Charles Dickens' character of Tiny Tim, where we're meant to feel pity on them, we're meant to feel bad for them and feel sympathy, but it's not necessarily a positive portrayal. Tiny Tim doesn't get so much respect for who he is, it's more so just the conditions that he's living with. Plot lines also draw from the medical models aimed to cure and eradicate disability, which is subtly promoting a very eugenic view of disability. And so we see this in the characters of Lenny and of Mice and Men, Charlie in Flowers for Algernon, or even more recently in the character of Will in the contemporary novel turned film Me Before You, where the characters are either the subtext is that they are going to die, or they are, as you see with Lenny and of Mice and Men, murdered for their disability. And so the message there is sent that it's better to die than to have a disability. And that's not really something that we want to be, showcasing in our classrooms and in our reading. And so continuing this, when it comes to these negative portrayals, Mitchell and Snyder have coined the term narrative prosthesis, which refers to an author's reliance on using disability as a plot device. And so we also want to consider what other identity markers are really used as a plot device, and do we want our identity markers to be a plot device that drives the plot? And so characters often experience disability to enhance a theme or to metaphorically represent a larger lesson. This leads to negative representation rather than promoting disability as a natural form of human diversity.
So many of these books have appeared on our mandatory curriculum over the years. Kerry and I have both had to teach these books in schools. And we now, of course, realize that these were very problematic texts, and we would approach them in different ways, teaching them now. We are also going to talk about why disability representation matters. So first, it's important to consider that many Americans learn more about disability from books and film rather than their personal interactions or policies.
And so that's really important to understand that when we consider that most disabled characters in books and film represent stereotypical tropes and don't actually capture what life with a disability is really like. And so that promotes a lot of misunderstanding. It allows negativity and negative perceptions of disability to flourish.
Literature and media simultaneously reflect and inform society, both highlighting and shaping our beliefs.
So all of these factors come into play in that you may not think you have disabled students in your classroom. They may not all be labeled disabled, but students come from various different contexts. They might have a disabled sibling or a disabled family member. And so the literature that we teach informs our students' understandings and attitudes towards students placed in special education settings. And so it's really important to consider that context of what are we teaching them and how are we shaping their understanding of the people in the world around them. So some key takeaways from this video. First, there are several ways to think about how disability is constructed. And hopefully in the 6 different ways we share today, you've thought about some new ideas about how you yourself understand disability. Second, disability has historically been poorly portrayed in both media and literature. And sadly, that negative portrayal continues in much of the media and literature we see today. And finally, the representations we see of disability and other identity traits impact our understanding and acceptance of it. So we thank you for joining this session today. We hope you found it informational. Links and resources are provided on our website. We share these references for you here. We encourage you to look them up, read them, and use them in your classroom curriculum. And we encourage you to connect with the LRC-South to follow our social media accounts for various updates. And we also encourage you to follow the NJ Department of Education in their various social media websites as well.